I'm Mordechai Cohen, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the third meeting of the Chinese-Jewish Conversation at Yeshiva University. 大家好，晚上好，我是洪主任。今天我们是的三次开会，中国人和犹太人之间的对话。We are privileged that 现在我想见中文，因为我的中文不太好，我的英文真棒。We're privileged this evening to hear from Dr. Yaakov Nagen, who came from Israel to offer his perspective on Jewish thought, which is compared with Eastern thought. And he's taught about Judaism in Beijing and in Shanghai. And his book on Jewish philosophy has been translated into Chinese, as you've heard. We are very grateful this evening to our sponsors, whom I'd like to mention, the Katz School, the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies, and the Confucius Institute of the SUNY School of Optometry. And therefore, let me just ask Chen Jie, who is the director, and she is a professor of ophthalmology at SUNY, to come and say a few words to our guests this evening. The program just got shorter. So I will say it. Chen Jie is really a superstar. She not only teaches ophthalmology and directs a number of programs, she also manages a number of charity programs, including a charity for low vision children in Tibet. And so she's really very dedicated to humanity. And that's, I think, what we're really all about. I should also thank many of those of you who spent many hours to make tonight's event successful. And your efforts really show that. Malka Siegel of the Katz School took care of ordering the food. Sarah Reinitz, Rona Steinerman, and Malka Lubavik booked the room, prepared the printed materials, and promoted the event on social media. Rona, if you could just stand up, and so everybody represent the rest of our staff. Is Malka here? She was outside, she was managing everything. And also, let me say a special thanks to our Chinese team of graduate assistants and Wang Yunxiang. He's taking Bihan to the subway. And Shu Naidan and Ye Weizhi. All of you guys, you can stand up, and you're already standing, but a special round of applause. This event, as most of you know, was publicized through the WeChat group. Those of you who use WeChat, and so we're very grateful to all of you for coming this evening. Yeshiva University is a university that's devoted to Jewish traditions, the ancient Jewish traditions. But as we all know, China is an ancient tradition as well that goes back over 5,000 years. And so how long does the Jewish tradition trace its lineage? 5,000 years is stretching it, unless you consider Noah to be Jewish, a proto-Jew. But there are many commonalities that we will hear about tonight, and many of the values that you find in the Eastern philosophy and Chinese philosophy resonate in Jewish philosophy, which is why our project finds so many willing ears and willing participants, and I welcome all of you to participate. And if there's something you think of that you would like to hear about, then please let us know. And in fact, Dr. Nagen graciously offered to give one lecture, which will be next week on Monday night. That's this lecture. If you see, do people have this brochure? No. Okay, it's on Monday night. If you don't, I'll bring it to you afterwards, or you can write to me. This is this Monday evening, and Dr. Nagen will tell us a little bit about that. but at the Mid-Autumn Festival that we had in this room with many of the Chinese students, they said they would like to hear an additional lecture about Jewish studies. And I called up Dr. Nagen in Israel, and I asked him, would you give a second lecture? And he said, yes, I'm there, whatever you want. And the truth is, we have a growing population of Chinese students here at Yeshiva University. And so I want to warmly welcome all of you. 非常欢迎亲爱的中国的学生们，很高兴你们参加我们的会议。And we're very happy that students from other universities as well have come to join us. Let me also bring to your attention one last thing, and then we will hear from Dr. Nagen. We also have a lecture next month, and I expected primarily a Chinese audience here, so I apologize. I only brought the Chinese flyer. The Jewish flyer, the English flyer is available on our website. Let me just see here. Our website is yu.edu/CJC. I should have like a plaque for that up here. But this is a lecture by Professor Anping Chin from Yale University, who will speak about the relevance of Confucius in our time, which is something she's written about, and she's a very distinguished scholar. I will also be speaking, because there will be a Jewish component, about Ezra the scribe, Ezra HaSofer, who lived about 100 years after Confucius and played a similar role in the crystallization of the Jewish scriptures. And so that is next month, and we will do a similar thing where we'll have a dinner beforehand at 6:30, or at 6 o'clock it says here, and then the lecture will be at 7:30. And now, without further ado, let me introduce Professor Dr. Nagen, because he really is very, very eager to share with you all of what he has to say, and it's very exciting, partly because we were classmates 5 years ago. I stopped counting. But so it's really a wonderful reunion, and so thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, well, so I'm thrilled to be here tonight with all of you. And in addition to my gratitude to all the people that Dr. Cohen mentioned, of course, I thank my former classmate, Dr. Cohen, for reaching out to me. And as Dr. Cohen mentioned, I feel that our people, the Jews and the Chinese, have much in common. Dr. Cohen mentioned that we are a very ancient people, and we won't. But in particular, I remember when I was in Beijing, I was told that they was just celebrating 3,000 years to the city Beijing, which for me was very moving, because I live not so far from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and there too, a few years ago, we celebrated 3,000 years to the establishment of Jerusalem by King David. So thinking that 3,000 years ago, two little towns, Beijing in China and Jerusalem in Israel, both become capitals of great cultures and civilizations. But another point of contact, and this is part of the sadder part of existence, both the Jews and the Chinese have suffered greatly on the hands of by other nations. And perhaps because of this shared suffering, there is much empathy. I know when I visited in Shanghai, hearing the stories about the many thousands of Jews during Judaism's darkest period, the Holocaust, who were saved. In fact, much of my family is connected to a yeshiva called the Mir Yeshiva, which was entirely saved because they went from Eastern Europe to Shanghai. For me, there's even a more personal connection to Shanghai, because my uncle, Aryeh Tweg, he was born and grew up in China, and he came well before the Eastern European Jews. He was, for many generations, his family lived in Shanghai as merchants. My uncle moved to Israel after Israel was born, but he studied Bible, the same area as Dr. Cohen. But unfortunately, in 1973, right before he gave in his doctorate, he was killed fighting for Israel in the Yom Kippur War. So I feel in many ways deeply connected to China. And again, we spoke about Confucius, so I don't want to get into any big divisions, but in my heart, I feel one of the most profound books, which I've studied and read many, many times, is the Tao Te Ching. And part of what I believe is that there's a balance between the Tao Te Ching and Confucius to create something more whole. So I might be a minority because everyone was talking about Confucius, but for me, my great love of Chinese philosophy is really the Tao Te Ching. So what? It's good. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Okay. So a few words about myself. I have a doctorate in Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University. And in addition to a doctor, I've been a rabbi for more than 20 years in Israel, where I'm very involved with interfaith activity, both between Judaism and Eastern religions, both Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, and also with Abrahamic religions, in particular between Judaism and Islam, to see how religion could be a source for connection and peace and not for killing each other, which is now. Before, there is a way that I begin, for many years, there's a way that I begin every lecture. And you may forget everything I talk about, but please remember the way that I begin every lecture, because this is something that the reason why I do it every day is because this is too important to forget. Okay, so everybody will remember now. What I do is I start by saying today's date in Hebrew. You could also say it in Chinese or English. And the reason why I say today's date before every lecture is because there's something very important. Today's date never was. It never was. Today's date will never be again. And if we truly realize this, today's date is totally unique. It may help us realize that today has to really matter. Don't miss out on today. So I remind myself this by every lecture by beginning with today's date, which I do in Hebrew. And then I add a verse from the Bible I'll say it in English, although I will say it in Hebrew, but the verse is that's from the book of Tehillim that says, the English translation would be, "This is the day that God has made. Let us rejoice and be joyful in it." And I start every class like this also to remind me that my starting point in how to look at life is to always remember what a great blessing life is. And to start with the verse, sometimes people think that the joy in life, something very special has to happen, like that wonderful musical performance we heard before. But if that's the case, that doesn't happen every day. But if we realize that try to change our consciousness to what a blessing life is, then perhaps every day we could feel that this day is a gift from God. Let us rejoice in it. Okay? So I will say it in Hebrew, and this is our beginning, and that's the most important part. And then we'll continue. Hayom Chaf Vav Tishrei Taf Shin Pei Ze Hayom Asa Adonai Nagila V'nismacha Bo. So before I get to the main topic of today, first of all, in my trip to China was in wake of a translation of much of my book on spirituality into Chinese. And it was a wonderful trip there's a saying in the Talmud that I've learned much from my teachers. Even more, I've learned from my colleagues. But most of all, I've learned from my students. And in giving lectures in Beijing and Shanghai, I came away with many teachings that I learned from my students there, and some of which I hope to share with you later today. But maybe I'll begin with one story, because I love telling stories, and I'm scared that they'll tell me time is up. So I will start with a story, one story, and then go on. When I live in a very small town in Israel, less than 1,000 people. It's like a little village. And I come to China, and and everything's so big. I see the ancient culture when I go around to Beijing, to the Forbidden City. And then I take a train to Shanghai, going at 350 kilometers every hour. And I come to Shanghai, and I see thousands of skyscrapers. Manhattan looks like a little suburb. And I feel like a little country bumpkin. I think, what am I doing here? And I'm thinking, what do I have to offer to the Chinese? They're moving ahead so fast, technology and everything. But then on the train, I remembered a story that they say in the Old West in America, these old trains, they still have some like this. Every car and train has a rope that if you pull the rope, it'll be a brake to the train. The train is moving along and somebody pulls the rope and the train stops and nobody knows who did this. And the train goes on and again somebody pulls the rope and now people are very angry. Who is doing this? And you see this old Indian man get off the train, sit down, and come back. And they say, what are you doing? And he says, my body is moving ahead so fast. My soul can't keep up with my body. I am suffering from soul lag. Just like on planes, when you fly from China, there's jet lag, right? He's suffering from soul lag. So I said to my Chinese hosts, I say, China, you're moving ahead so fast. If you invited a rabbi from Israel to talk about spirituality, you must feel that with all this progress of going ahead, that there is some soul lag. I said, China, your technology, your fire rushing ahead. And rabbi from Israel, this is maybe spirituality. And then they gave me but then they didn't know what I was going to talk about. But my hosts gave me the gift that they specially made in anticipation of my visit. And I spoke to them about China fire and Israel water. And the gift that they made for the visit, they have tremendous hospitality in China, as you know. 2 porcelain teacups. The red cup to represent China, the red flag of China, and which is of course the red of the workers of doing, and blue for the blue flag of Israel, which is because of the blue of the flag comes from the water and the heavens, which are and this is also the color of our special garment, the tzitzit. So, and they even had a very sweet card called Shevet Achim, brothers sitting together. The brothers they wrote it backwards because they didn't know that Hebrew is right to left and not left to right. You could see it and pass it around. And saying, together, Israel and China, we are brothers. And I thought this is a very good idea because the Jewish people are 1 out of 500 in the world. But the Jews and the Chinese together were 1 in 5. So this is a good connection. Okay, so this is the first part of the stories. And now I will go to the major topic today. As I said, the Jewish people were a very small part of the world. But our impact has been much greater than our numbers. And much of this is because of Jewish culture that encourages, individuality, multiple opinions, seeing that arguing could actually be a blessing, asking questions. These are the essence of Jewish culture, which allows us to achieve more than our numbers. Part of this is because our concept of truth. To arrive at the truth, we could clarify, get things more clear by debate. We also believe that the truth itself, there are many sides to the truth. What I would like to do, depending on how much time we have, to have two parts of the lecture. The first to talk about this culture of why multiple opinions is a blessing and not a problem. And the second part to show how this culture is rooted in the Jewish conception of what is humanity. Usually I would say what is mankind, but now we have all these wonderful women in the room and realize that it's talking about what the essence of humanity is. So the essence of who we are is what leads to this culture. Now, and this goes back to after the Bible, the most important Jewish work is the Talmud. Okay, so the Talmud in all parts began close to the beginning of the Common Era till about the year 500, about a 500-year process of development. And there's something remarkable about the Talmud that I think that even many Jews who study the Talmud aren't aware about what a remarkable book this is. What is remarkable about the Talmud that talks about all aspects of law and life is when a issue is raised, certainly in the first part of the Talmud called the Mishnah, they'll raise a issue, but you will not get an answer of yes, no, or what to do. It'll have one rabbi will say this, and they'll bring another rabbi that says the opposite, and a third rabbi that will have a third opinion. And then you read it and say, okay, so what am I supposed to do? And the Talmud won't tell you the answer. So you have to break your head and read it and debate what is the conclusion. It doesn't tell you what the conclusion is. So as a result, studying Talmud is very challenging. It's seeing different opinions and have to decide which is the right opinion, which is the wrong opinion. Is it some combination? The Talmud's power is not what it says, but what it doesn't say. And this leads to a whole culture of different opinions. There's a famous story in the Talmud, and because we don't have a lot of time, I will not read inside, but these sources you will have, there is in English, also in Chinese. So source number one, so once they could read it as I tell it, about two of the greatest rabbis in the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And when Reish Lakish died, Rabbi Yochanan was brokenhearted. And part of it was because they were study partners. In a classical Jewish setting, you don't study on your own with the book. You study with a partner. And the reason why you have a partner is so that you can disagree with each other. Because by disagreeing, you make things clearer. So Rabbi Yochanan, his study partner died, and he was brokenhearted. So they looked for a new study partner, and they found a new study partner, and everything Rabbi Yochanan would say, his partner would say, "That's brilliant, you're right. I will bring you 20 proofs that you're right." But Rabbi Yochanan says, no, this isn't what I want. I don't want somebody to say, give me, I think it says 24 proofs that I'm right. I want you to give me 24 proofs that I am wrong, because it is the other, having the other approach to debate. This is what leads us to a greater and deeper truth. And in fact, there is in the part a Mishnah, which is the early part of the Talmud, that says that there are two types of arguments. They are arguments that nothing comes out of them, but they are the arguments that are for the sake of heaven. And those that are for the sake of heaven, these are debates that will be fruitful. This is in source number 2. Now, the Maimonides, in his commentary, explains what does it mean an argument that is for the sake of heaven will be something that will be fruitful. And he says it's not about religion. It's about what is the motivation of the two people that are debating with each other. Maimonides, and this I will read inside. I'll read it in the English, and I hope this is also translated in the end of source number 2. An argument not for the sake of lowly profit, but to seek the truth will endure. Sometimes people argue to show that they're right. But if you come to a discussion, a conversation, because you are a seeker, you are seeking the truth, then something might be discovered. Because when you come to a discussion, are you open or are you closed? If you are closed, nothing will happen because of the debate. I will try to convince you that I am right, and you will try to convince me that you are right. But nothing's going to happen. We are just wasting our time. But if I come, I am a seeker, and you are a seeker, when we meet, we will discover new things. And this brings us to the Jewish concept of truth. Because part of this is, if truth is one-dimensional, if there's only one face to the truth, so either I'm right or you're right. But I will share some teachings about truth which will show why this is not the case. I have the Hebrew word for truth is emet. Okay, emet. I wish I knew Chinese like even to the level of Dr. Cohen, which I don't, but maybe we'll at least do one Hebrew word. The Talmud teaches, the Jerusalem Talmud teaches that the word emet, which means truth, starts with the letter Aleph, which is the beginning of the Hebrew alphabet. It continues with the letter Mem, which is the middle of the Hebrew alphabet, and ends with the letter Taf, which is the end of the alphabet.
It's source 11. In the
source 11. Oh, I'm right. Sorry. Okay, source 11. Okay. So we have there the word truth, and this shows us that truth, there are many faces to the truth. Truth is able to see that there is the way I look at things and the way that you look at things, and somehow see there's something true in my way and there's something true in your way, and the emet puts it all together. I'll mention that the Hebrew word for falsehood, the opposite of truth, are 3 letters, sheker. These are 3 letters that are all next to each other. If truth, emet, is the beginning of the alphabet, the middle and the end, this is truth. Sheker, falsehood, is 3 adjacent letters at one extreme of the alphabet. Okay? This gets also to the concept of shalom, right? I think everybody's heard the word shalom, and often hello or peace, but it's really much deeper than that. The beginning of source 11 is a teaching that based from a from Jewish mysticism, the Zohar, that says that what is shalom? Shalom begins with the Hebrew letter shin, which represents fire. It ends with the letter mem, which represents mayim, water. Shalom is to integrate fire and water together. The fire and water are opposites. And to say that you want shalom is to find I have my opinion, you have your opinion, and that is the opposite. How can I try to integrate these together? So if this is our conception of truth, if this is our conception of shalom, we understand why a debate could be very fruitful, because it's not I am right or you are right, but I am a seeker and you are a seeker, and together, by debating, we can achieve a great truth. Now I would like to share you one funny story and then one very deep story that I discovered in China. One of the people in the lecture said that his wife is making a film about a Chinese man who fell in love with a Jewish woman. Someone told me at the beginning. Maybe he's left by now. But I mentioned in my lecture in Shanghai that in Jewish mysticism, water is a masculine symbol, where fire is a feminine symbol. And one of the Chinese men said, wait a second, in China, it's the opposite. The Chinese men are fire, the Chinese women are more water. So he says to me, it would be very dangerous for a Chinese man to marry a Jewish woman. It would be fire and fire. So. But now I would like to get to something very wonderful and very deep an insight that I learned from one of the students in China. It was, I think, a young Chinese woman, I think she was about 19 years old. And she had such a wonderful insight that right after the lecture, I called up one of Israel's biggest rabbis to say, I heard something incredible in China. So I'll tell you the story. It starts with a very sad incident that in the summer of 2014, there were 3 Jewish teenagers, 2 of them learned in the same school as my children, that were kidnapped and murdered by terrorists. And the head of their yeshiva is a rabbi called Rabbi Dov Zinger. And at the funeral of these 3 boys, there was a feeling that there was tremendous unity in the Jewish people at that very tragic moment. And Rabbi Zinger says, do you know what the Jewish people, what we're all about? The Jewish people, it's, you take two Jews, they have 3 opinions, but 1 heart. Okay, so I came to China, and one of the names of my lectures was about multiple opinions. So I wrote 2 people, 2 opinions, 1 heart. Okay, but in the lecture I said, the truth is, the original phrase was 2 people, 3 opinions, 1 heart. And this Chinese girl raises her hands and says, do you know, why was it 3 opinions and not 2? So I thought about it and said, I don't know. So she says, I'm going to explain it to you. She said, okay. So she said, if 2 people come and they don't have 1 heart, I come to show that you're wrong, and you come to say that I'm wrong. As I said earlier, we'll begin with 2 people and 2 opinions, and we will end with 2 people and 2 opinions. But if people come with 1 heart, and they want to listen to each other, a conversation, and they want to learn from each other, so they begin 2 people with 2 opinions. But that meeting between them will create the third opinion. So I called up Rabbi Zinger from Shanghai. I said, Rabbi Zinger, what were you thinking when you said three opinions? But he wouldn't tell me. But it couldn't have been as good as what she said. But then she went even another step, because I told them that at our school there was a very famous rabbi who taught called Rabbi Menachem Fruman, and he tried to. There's often debates between the left-wing politics and the right-wing politics, right? We know in America we have the Democrats and the Republicans, and sometimes there's such animosity and sometimes even hatred. And it's very heartbreaking, because the most greatest value is for us to feel connected to each other. So Rabbi Fruman would always say that remember that each of us, we each have a left side to us, and we each have a right side to us. And when he would give lectures, he would say to everybody, let us all clap hands. Because when we clap hands, we bring our left side and our right side together. So I had said that earlier in the lecture. And she says, I want to tell you another thing. She says, your left side is just a hand. My right side is just a hand. When I bring them together, if I make sounds, something new is created. Their meeting creates something new. So this is a beautiful insight about how quickly I could come with an idea that I was told that for many, it's not an idea which is often stressed in China about individuality and multiple opinions and questioning authority, but so rapidly, the audience was not only able to understand what was taught, but to come up with new ideas. So that was really a very, very powerful and wonderful experience. Okay, so I would like to take things one step further, okay? And so this is really the first and the major part, because I know I've been told to keep things not too long, which is about the conception of truth and multiple opinions. But I think this culture goes back to two very significant teachings that really start from the Bible about who we are. One teaching in the Bible is that, and maybe for me this is maybe the most significant Jewish concept, that each of us is created, what is called in Hebrew, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. That the fact that we are in the image of God, this changes who we are and who the other person is. Because believing that we are in the image of God, and we'll talk about what that means, first of all, it's something that says, I am much more than I think I am. That also means I have greater responsibility, greater potential. And it also means, how do I relate to other people? Because you are also a Tselem Elohim in the image of God. So are all of my image of myself, my image of the other person, our relationships becomes totally different. The Talmud says when there is debate, sometimes both sides of the debate, the Talmud says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both of them are the word of God, because I have something divine inside of me, and you also have something divine, and you too. So this concept is one of the greatest and most significant concepts. But this means that my opinion matters. My opinion is an expression of the divine. So therefore, I will not lower my head, but I will believe in my potential and feel that the truth inside of me is of great value, even if it's different than what other people are saying. Now, another one of the sources here, and I don't know if all of them are translated, is source number 7 translated?
Yes.
So, one of the greatest questions in Judaism is, what does it mean that we are each in the image of God, of the divine? And there are many answers. And I'm happy to say that they're all right. But one approach that I discussed in many of my lectures in Beijing and Shanghai was that of Rabbi Cook. That Rabbi Cook said that it connects up to the fact that we have the ability to choose, is the fact that we can make decisions, we can make choices. And our ability to make choices is what makes us human and divine. That animals have many instincts, but we have the ability to make real choices, and therefore we're responsible for our choices. Now, one very sweet story from Beijing about this teaching. I gave one lecture in Beijing, and I spoke about that the essence of our humanity and divinity is our ability to make choices. And the next day I gave another lecture, and one of the students came back and told me the following story. He said that after the lecture, he went to eat at a Chinese restaurant in Beijing, and he comes to the restaurant, and he sees that there's this waiter, this little bit elderly. He looks tired and worn out, sitting in a corner of the restaurant and a little bit dozing off. And he said to me, I looked at that waiter, and he looks just like any waiter. And I said to myself, is this person really a Tselem Elohim? That person, he's just a waiter. He's a Tselem Elohim? What? But then he said, as I was looking at him, the waiter opened up his eyes and looked at me and saw that I was looking at him. And then he gave me a big smile. And the student said to me, he said, I realized he could have responded in many different ways. He could have ignored the fact that I'm looking at him. This could have been a reasonable decision. He could have been angry that, what are you looking at me like this for? And then the student got all excited. He said, no, but he made a decision. He chose to smile at me. And by making that decision, that was making a choice. And there I saw his Tselem Elohim. I saw he is in the image of God, making his own decisions. So again, of course, this statement about the divine is inside of us. We have the power and responsibility to make our decisions. I once heard that a nurse that deals with people who are on their deathbeds said that people often tell about their great regrets in life. People at the end of their lives, they say, what do they regret about their lives? And many of them say, I regret that I live not the life that I wanted to live, but the life that other people wanted for me to live. And this is a tragic statement. And this is a statement saying that people saying, I did not choose the life I wanted. I let other people choose for me. So this again is a tremendous teaching, which, as you see, is connected to this concept of truth. That this allows me to have multiple opinions, to question authority and to disagree, because I am not a nobody. I am a Tselem Elohim, and I am making my choices. And The last point, we're getting close to the end, is that maybe one last source, and again, I think primarily you'll have to read this yourself. Source number 5, is that also translated?
Yes.
Source number 5 is yet another incredibly significant point mentioned by the Bible. The Bible, in the story in the Bible, humanity begins with one person. That one person is ultimately divided into two parts, masculine and feminine. But we all go back to that initial Adam. And the Talmud teaches that this is important to teach us something. God could have created a world with 7 billion people, but he chose to begin with one person. And there are many, this source in front of you, which we're not going to read all of it, brings down 4 significant reasons why it is so significant that the world began with one person. One means we have a common ancestor. This is against racism, right? Jews and Chinese have suffered so much from racist belief. And the Bible, by saying, the Talmud says, the fact we all have one father, we all have one mother. So all of racism is a lie because we are all brothers and sisters. This is one of the approaches in the Talmud. Another approach is that to show the great value of every individual, because at the beginning of the world, there was only one person in the world. So one person is an entire world. But the last reason given by the Talmud, and this already gets and with this I will end and then leave time for questions and answers. The reason which deeply connects, when I do my interfaith work, I talk about the common ancestor, our common humanity. But since today's lecture is talking about multiple opinions and why this is a blessing, it is the last reason is we have one ancestor. This allows us to demonstrate the greatness of God. Why? Because normally, if you start with one stamp, everything comes out the same. The glory of humanity and of God's creation is we began with one ancestor. But each of us, the Talmud says, is different. In the English it says, I'll read it in the English, and with this we will end. Humans stamp many coins with one seal, and they're all like one another. But the King of Kings, the Holy Blessed One, stamped every human with the seal of the first man, but none of them are like another. The greatness of humanity is no one in the world is like me. This is our power, not our weakness, that we are different. And the Talmud concludes that passage. Therefore, everyone must say, for my sake, the world was created. This belief is there's nobody in the world like me. No one ever was like me, and no one will be like me. This empowers my individuality. And this allows me to say that my opinion matters. So as my major argument today, the Jewish culture of multiple opinions, of asking questions, questioning authority, it all goes back to this deep conception of what each of us is. And let me just mention at the conclusion, then for those who want questions and answers, for those who want to go home, may you have a very wonderful night. First of all, if people are interested in more of these teachings, first of all, you're welcome on the lecture on Monday night. There'll be a little bit of overlap. It's a different topic, but some stories I can't help telling a story about the Chinese girls, so you'll have to hear that again. In English, my book came out as Become Bless, Jewish Spirituality Between East and West. If I brought there are a number of copies over there if anyone would like to purchase. So if so, please take a copy and come over to me. Also, if so, I will give you my email, and part of the book has been translated into Chinese, and I will be very happy. It's on a Word file. I could send it to, I'm very happy to send it out to anybody who's interested. My email is Nagen, which is Nagen at gmail.com. So if anybody sends me an email, I'll be very happy to send, as soon as I get, not every day I get to my computer, as soon as I can, to send you as a Word file the Chinese version, and you're very welcome to circulate it, because I
Say again your email.
Y is Yaakov, Y, and then Nagen, which is Nagen at gmail.com. And anyone who wants to improve their English, or maybe if somebody doesn't know Chinese, so again, I have a few of the copies over there, so anyone's welcome to purchase them. Okay, now I'm happy to stay for any questions or.
I'll moderate a little bit of it.
Okay, so maybe we could start with one or two questions with everybody together, and then afterwards I will stay here, so people can feel free to leave, and they could come over, and I'll be. Please.
Thanks. Actually, it's more of a comment than a question, and that is when you spoke about shalom and how the shin represents Aish, and the mem sofit represents mayim, and how to bring them together. So in the middle, the emtsai is low, and the idea is in order to bring fire and water together, you always have to think about someone else. Low as opposed to lead someone. So when you think of someone else and you try to reach out, then you can bring the two opposites together.
Beautiful insights. Now I'll say in Shanghai you heard this, and in Manhattan. Yeah, thank you. And what's your name?
It's man.
Oh, yeah. I think we've yeah. In my Yaakov Nagen days, I think I remember your name many generations ago. Before you were born, but after I was born, right? Okay. Thank you for that comment. Okay. Please, what is your name?
Barbara.
Barbara.
Yeah, I'm very glad I'm here. My question is how to balance individuality and Judaism law. I mean the laws
Yes.
for daily life, and from the Jewish law and the Jewish cultural perspective,
Mm-hmm.
how to balance these two, and how to make them harmonize
Right.
in your daily life.
So the truth is, and this is one of the great and fascinating challenges between, and in fact, the full way I give classes, and maybe I should have done this also, I begin with this verse about, and in my Monday lecture I'll talk more about this, because the duality between how the saying about every day, the joy of every day is very much about I go with the flow, my personal experience. I end every lecture generally with another verse from the Bible, which exactly tries to give that counterbalance. The other verse, and please help me translate it right, is from the book of Kohelet, which is a verse in Hebrew saying, I'll try to translate, Sof Davar,
The final word.
the final word, okay?
Hakol nishma.
Everything
comes out. Everything. The final word is
the
this.
final word, we're do the commandments of God and fear Him. So part of that balance, also as a teacher, in the yeshiva where I teach, part of the day I ask to teach specifically halacha, exactly because of that. and part I teach Kabbalah. So the spirituality and also the law. So, but I think you put your finger exactly on the really great challenge of the balance. So it's a wonderful question, and the question is much bigger than any answer I could give, and certainly not now. But thank you for the question. Okay.
Isn't there a concept of Achrei Rabim Lehatot?
Mhm.
Like with all the discussions we've been having with everything, with the rabbis, and I think one
Yeah,
of the
the sources, yes. So there is one way to deal with the tension. One of the passages I brought, the Talmud brings the debate. It says, both sides are expressing the words of God. But what to do is like this opinion and not like that opinion. So in the ancient time, in ancient times, there would be a high court that would make decisions. Would have made things maybe even richer now. We no longer have the high court of Judaism that has a majority rule on it, and therefore things are much less centralized, which allows much more multiple opinions and evolution of different ideas. Okay, so maybe one more question with everybody, and then I'm here. I won't go till I have no deadline, and I'll be happy to talk to people, but everyone else is welcome to leave. Okay, so one last question maybe for one of the Chinese students. Okay, so maybe afterwards give a chance for some of the... Okay, and what's your name?
My name is Jin. So thank
Jin,
you.
right, question.
Yeah, Dr. Nagen. So I'm wondering, like, do you have any specific advice to the soul lag generation in China, especially for the youth generation?
Yeah, well, within China, again, first of all, I think it's always good, first of all, to give a lot of stress to your own tradition, because your own traditions, I was once in an ashram in India, and I asked one of the head of the ashram was there for 55 years. And I said to him, I have a wife and 7 kids. I can't spend 55 years in the ashram. Could you give me, just very briefly, what have you learned after 55 years sitting in an ashram? So he said, I've learned that there are many paths to get to the top of the mountain. But if you keep switching paths, you're never going to get there. So primarily stick to one path based on your tradition. So I would say that you should be enriched by other traditions, but always be rooted in your tradition. Now, in terms of Solag, and again, I confess I have a much too limited understanding of your traditions. But as I said, I feel in the fire and water duality. Even one of the sources I have on this, source number 10, that wasn't translated, but it's in English. The one Chinese source is from the Tao Te Ching. I'll read, nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and the inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard, and the gentle overcomes the rigid. I find that the Tao Te Ching, to me, speaks very deeply to my soul. And I feel in terms of, so within my limited understanding of Chinese, somebody's worrying about his soul lag. There are many great things from Confucius, which I'm less familiar with, but that aspect of the water side of life, as opposed to the fire side, for me, I would say, study deeply the Tao Te Ching, and then become enriched by other traditions, such as our Jewish tradition that we are trying to share with you. Yeah, okay. And now I think whether with Yitzchak and others, I will stay here and be very happy to talk to anybody who wants to stay here. Okay. Okay.
I'll say a few words about it.
Thank you.
So thank you very much to Dr. Nagen for what was really a fascinating lecture. And I have to say, obviously I've studied Judaism extensively, but I've learned so much from your lecture. And part of that is because when you seek, or when we seek to explain what we do to an outside culture, we reveal new things in our culture, in our own culture. So I learned a lot from you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I think that what you said about the Chinese culture, or just to respond to the soul lag, and then Barbara asked a question about the halakha. In the Chinese tradition, you also have rituals, and Confucius himself spoke about the importance of preserving those rituals, li, right? So those rituals are very important in traditional Chinese and in the halakha as well. But as Dr. Nagen knows, and all of our Jewish audience knows, it's a challenge for young people now to keep to those traditions. Not all of our young people want to keep to the traditions, and that's the challenge that we face in modernity. There is the concept of the Tao, so that's Tao Te Ching, Tao and Da are the way and the virtue, the classic of the way and the virtue, but the Tao also is used in Confucianism, and Tao means a path. And if you think about halakha, halakha means the way you walk, and even in Arabic, sharia is the path to water in the desert. So our ancient traditions show us a path that the ancients dictated to us that we must abide by. And that idea is very challenged in the modern world. So what you spoke about individuality speaks a lot more to us, to young people today, but you're not pitting one against the other. But that's what I learned from your lecture. And what I also learned from your lecture that I appreciate so much is that, and I also am involved in comparing Christianity and Islam and Judaism. In Christianity, and we have here an expert on Christianity, Sam is studying for his doctorate, comparing Christianity and Judaism. In Christianity, faith is the central element. And it's not the exclusive element, but that's where everything revolves around. In Judaism, halakha and the way that you behave is so important. And that for that reason, there's so much more commonality, I think, between Chinese and Jewish traditions, because that idea of the Tao, the path by which you should live, and Confucius didn't speak about the metaphysical in the way of the Taoists, but rather the way of ethical behavior, and that is shared, and that humanist development or that humanist concept. So what you really did today, which I think is so interesting, and want to read your book about Be, Become, and Bless, and we should all read it, and you can read it in Chinese as well. I circulated your email on our WeChat group.
Oh, great.
So a lot of people 100 people got that.
Okay.
So you will I'll circulate the Chinese version as well. But I think what you really taught us today is how much human element there is in Judaism, apart from the faith in God, which of course is central in Judaism as well, but it's not the exclusive focus of Judaism. So with that, let me again thank Dr. Nagen for a really illuminating lecture. What I often say to my class at the end is class dismissed, but those who would like to stay, the professor is here and would like to teach more, but just we can't obligate everybody to stay here. And so again, thank you very much. And we look forward to the lecture on Monday evening.
Thank you.
So that's going to be part 2.
Thank you. Okay. And maybe, well, I can't help myself. Barbara, just thought of a very short response to your question. There's a quote which is so beautiful. I need an excuse to use this to share this quote with you, but I think it really gets to the essence of your challenge. There's a French writer, Marcel Proust, which I'm probably mispronouncing, Proust, who says that the challenge of life. Listen carefully. The challenge of life. We all want to hear. What is the challenge of life? It is not in discovering new lands, but in seeing the old ones with new eyes. So we could say that there is the tradition, which is the old lands. The challenge is not finding a new land, not leaving the traditions, but new eyes, reinterpreting the meaning of some of these rituals and not necessarily switching them. Okay.